He found his true calling in his teens while editing his college newspaper. After graduation, he rose from reporter to city editor in just 5 months. But that wasn't enough for this newsman. Along with another Thai journalist, he founded The Nation, the only locally owned English-language newspaper in the 1970s. Today, he is a well-read columnist, a popular TV commentator, and founder of The Nation Group, a leading media organization. I'm Anasuya Sanyal, and welcome to Conversation with Suthichai Yoon in Bangkok, Thailand. Suthichai Yoon has his finger on the pulse of Thailand. The editor-in-chief of the Nation Multimedia Group not only publishes newspapers in both Thai and English, he's also into television and radio broadcasting. As a television anchorman on several news programs, Suthichai is a household name in Thailand. A few years ago, Suthichai jumped onto the bandwagon of the popular social networking site Twitter, and now he has more than 100,000 followers. Thank you, Prince Suthichai, for talking with me today. You know I follow you on Twitter. And yes. When did you first hear about Twitter, and did it immediately make sense to you? And when did you know that this was a way to kind of get your point of view across?
A few years ago, when I started to read about Twitter, I didn't know what it was, except that it was the sound of a little bird. And then when I tried it, I found that it is a very useful tool for reporters, because we can then communicate with people who normally would not be talking to reporters. Soon I realized that this would be a big, what I call liberation for reporters who can talk to anyone, who can file questions, who can follow news tips on Twitter. That's when I started to tweet, they call it. And then soon I found that the Prime Minister of Thailand was also on Twitter. So I thought, hey, what about doing a good interview with the Prime Minister on Twitter? Yeah. So I approached him. I said, why don't we do this just for fun, because we don't know how it's going to work out. Perhaps it has never been tried before in the world. So he said, yeah, why not? But I'm not good on the keyboard, Thai alphabets. I said, it's okay. He said, can I ask my daughter to key in the Thai alphabets for me? I said, go ahead, as long as it's your answers and not your daughter's answers. So we did it. And I think, it created a lot of interest in the Thai general people who are following news.
Was there another time that it was kind of a moment when you said, wow, this is something that is now part of my daily life?
Yes. There was a moment when the red shirts were at the Rajdamnern intersection. You must have been there too. And I was in China. I was in Beijing. And my reporters were all tweeting from the scene. And I was worried about their safety. So I started retweeting their stories. At the same time, I tweeted to give them instructions to stay away from danger. That's how I got to be directing, really, the news operations from China. So, this is it. I told myself. And when I came back, I had a meeting with all my reporters and editorial staff and said, you have to tweet. Everybody has to. And now it becomes the rule of the office that if you don't tweet, you don't belong to the editorial department.
And how is that news received by your staff and your colleagues?
Initially, they were quite reluctant, They would say, why should we tweet? More work. Same pay, and we're going to waste a lot of time to do it.
And did that perception change?
Now, after 2 or 3 years, anyone who does not tweet is an exception now. And they all found it very useful in their reporting task. And in fact, most of them would say that they cannot do without tweeting. They ask questions, and they sometimes get tips. Very important that they get quick tips, breaking news from the Twitter.
Let's talk about when you started
And what made you start a locally owned English newspaper rather than a Thai language newspaper in the 70s?
Well, it's 40 years ago, 1971. I was working at the Bangkok Post as the city editor, news editor. And then the Bangkok Post at that time was owned by Lord Thomson of Fleet of London. He bought the other paper, the competing paper called the Bangkok World. And me, as a young, crazy reporter, not knowing, how difficult it was to run a newspaper, invited some friends from both the Bangkok Post and the Bangkok World to, hey, why don't we start a newspaper? At that time, the paper was run mostly by foreign journalists, sub-editors and editors. But we, the young journalists, then reporters, sub-editors, writers, thought that perhaps we could put out an English language paper from the Thai point of view, edited, reported by Thais. And we wanted to tell the audience, foreigners or Thai, about what we thought about the political situation then. It was very interesting because it was under military dictatorship.
1971.
71.
And there were...
If you were writing in English, you would not be subjected to too much censorship because the government leaders did not read English at the time. So they were worried about Thai language newspapers more than the English language newspaper. So when we started The Nation as a Thai edited Thai reporter doing the job, we had more leeway than the Thai newspapers.
You think you still have that sort of leeway? Obviously, the Thai government officials do read English at this time.
Especially the Prime Minister,
Some of them,
right?
some of them seem very English indeed.
Our editorial position has always been quite independent because we are not owned by politicians or by business interest groups. We are mostly owned by journalists, and the rest are in the stock market. We have maintained that independent position all along, despite pressure from the military when we started and the very rough years through political chaos, crises. Of course, we have come under a lot of pressure because the establishment at any given time would want us to be their friends rather than their critique. But so far, so good.
Do you think that we're coming to the end of the newspaper era? How do you see it, being a founder of a newspaper, but also being such a fierce proponent of the new technologies?
At least 10 to 15 years, the print media will still survive, I think. But at the same time, we're training our people to do all kinds of digital content. In the end, it doesn't matter what platform it is. We will be producing editorials, news commentaries, whatever the platform is. So to me, the new technology has liberated me as a reporter. And I think this is something that would change the world of journalism. And that's why I'm so excited about it, and I try to learn everything that I could. I used to be totally ignorant about technology. I was scared. I couldn't even touch a computer without getting nervous about things. I lost the whole story that I wrote and all this. And even now, I don't really understand what the technical side of it is. But as long as it could help me process the content, directing it to the people that I want, I think that is superb. And that, to me, is the most important part of what the journalists today have to learn.
Your nickname is Cafe Dam, black coffee. Is it because you're strong? Is it because you're bitter?
Well, the nickname came from the editor of Siam Rat. It's a daily newspaper. He called me one day and he said, I would like you to write a column, a daily column. I said, yeah, no problem. And then he said, I don't want to use your real name. I said, why? You're too young, and people would not believe what you write. So we need a pseudonym that would sound credible. So he said, you think of a nickname. So I was drinking coffee then. I said, coffee. He said, black or white coffee. I said, black. Yeah. So that's it.
So it's not that you wake people up.
I hope that I wake people up in the morning and that it's bitter sometimes, but it's always stimulating. I hope.
From the time Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra was ousted in 2006, to Democrat Party leader Apisit Wejjajiwa becoming Prime Minister in 2008, and the periodic violent clashes between the red shirts and the yellow shirts, Thailand has been plagued by political upheavals in recent years. Will the country eventually overcome the political stalemate, or does this period of uncertainty spell the beginning of a new Thailand?
Let's talk politics. What is the biggest political problem facing Thailand today?
It's the quality of politicians. I think that's the main problem. The process of electing an MP is corrupt. That's why there's no way that we can find good quality politicians who can really, upgrade the quality of politics. I'm just concerned about how do we get the new young people to be interested and to have that sense of public spirit, to volunteer their service, to work for the public. I don't see that at the moment. To solve the problem of corruption in politics, we have to start at the reform in education. I think that is where we have to start. And it will take time. It will not be instant solution, but I think that if we really launch serious education reform now, in 5 years' time, we will see some signs of improvement. But now we don't see that yet. Not even the current Prime Minister, who has said he's very serious about education. In fact, before he became Prime Minister, when he was in opposition, he was asked what portfolio he would like to take if he were to become a real politician or in government. He said education. But he didn't take that because he jumped all the way up to the prime ministership. Yes. So I think reform in education will be the main priority if we really want to solve the problem.
How much do you make of the assertion that divisions in Thai society run deep versus the urban versus rural, red versus yellow, the rich versus the poor? Do you think it's an oversimplification, or do you think that it's an idea that has a sound basis?
People would tell you that the real problem is the gap. And so much so that we talk about the amat, you see, the elite and the pride, the poor, the downtrodden. It has always been the case in Thailand. And when politics was not that divisive, there was never any serious problem with that. But now that political objectives become the main thing, that has become the rallying cry. So it is there, but it has been exploited by, depending on which side you're on. To me, yes, you have to solve the problem. Otherwise, it will become more serious.
Have you been surprised about the longevity of the Prime Minister? How long do you think he will be able to stay in power? What do you think his political legacy will be?
Have you noticed that he keeps talking about new elections? And the more often he mentions that, you believe me, the longer he will stay. I think you can say, really, that he's the only game in town at the moment. Because look at the opposition party. In politics, the big question is, who is the next Prime Minister? And you really have to have someone to compete with him to really force an election.
What do you think if the former Prime Minister Thaksin comes back and is able to come back?
Unfortunately, it would not happen because it would be very difficult for him to come back and stand in the election in an open way because he has to go through all these cases, legal problems he will face, and that it would not be a fair competition because he would not run. He can run the show from behind the scene, but he will not be up front as Prime Minister. Maybe one reason is too dangerous for him, physically. I would like to see that the two of them going out to the people and say, this is what I do for you. Elect me. I'm a better Prime Minister. it would be such an open competition, such an exciting competition that we will benefit from that kind of a real political confrontation, positive confrontation. But I'm sorry to say that it would not happen. So he would stay on, I think, for as long as he wants. His term will expire officially in December 2011. I think he will call election a few months before that. He would do it. He would not do it until he has to do it. Because there's nothing to stop him, apart from the fact that the court may decide to dissolve his party in the second case, if that happens.
Traditionally, Buddhism, monarchy, nationhood have meant Thai-ness. They've made up this trinity of factors. Do you think Thai-ness is changing?
The old Thai-ness was basically the relationship of a patron society, meaning that you have your senior and then you look up upon him, he supports you, and you live together, accepting that difference in status in society. But that has changed, and I think it's going to change for the better, because it would mean that it would be a society of more equality in that sense, and that you will get the younger people being able to argue with the senior people, and you would not just blindly follow what the senior people tell you. And all the institutions will have to go through this transformation.
We have seen this year Thailand going through so much change, and personally as a reporter witnessing that change, it was a little bit of a loss of innocence to see what would move people to react with violence or feel so strongly about something political, that violence was the only way they felt that they could express it.
In a way, you may think that violence breeds violence. But to me, I think the violence in the past few years has taught both the yellow and the red shirts that, no, you better avoid violence, otherwise you cannot achieve your goal. If you look at the red shirt movement, the latest selection of Kuntida as the chairman shows that they are now regrouping and not using the threat of violence. I think Kuntida has come up with a very clear policy that the red shirt movement will go for peaceful and trying to do political education rather than confrontation. I'm not afraid of more violence. I'm just afraid that they will not play by the rules of the game, meaning that they will go underground and that they will try to achieve the goals in other means, not necessarily violent means, but in means that would be too complicated for democracy.
As a foreign journalist who's covered politics in Thailand, I've heard a lot of comments that foreigners can't possibly understand what goes on here and the issues here.
I don't believe foreigners cannot understand Thailand. The general picture, foreigners sometimes get more accurate than we do because we have our own biases and our own vested interests. But then there are also things that foreigners who have to live long enough here and to be involved in, interact more with the Thais to understand those little corners in the heart and minds. But it happens to every society. It's just that this time it's, the yellow and red problem gets so complicated, so violent, so inexplicable that you get people who say, oh, you don't understand us. And then you have to be on our side to understand it. One strange character of Thai people is they believe in what foreigners say more than the Thais themselves. So never believe in what statement they make about you not understanding them. When you say something, they will listen very carefully.
There has been a movement in Bangkok of late where foreign chefs have opened Thai restaurants.
Yeah.
And many people have taken exception to these award-winning chefs coming in from abroad, opening Thai restaurants, and maybe modifying the food, maybe claiming that it's authentic. This has caused a crisis of civilization in this country. I've heard these foreign chefs described as charlatans. People in the newspapers are talking about a slap in the face to Thai cuisine. I have to know where you stand on this issue.
Well, only a Thai like me can say this. Sometimes Thais are hypocrites. And as I said, they quietly admire foreign stuff. But then they would feel a slap in the face if the foreigners try to do things that the Thais think they can do better. And you should not be surprised with that kind of reaction. But it's the official kind of reaction. It's the reaction that has to be expressed to keep our confidence, the self-confidence that we need to survive on. Otherwise, we would lose the whole confidence and identity. And in the end, I think the Thais are people who try to understand themselves, but at the same time, will try to be defensive when you come too close. But if you come close enough and you stay there and show your sincerity, the Thais will embrace you. So don't worry about the Thais. They'll be okay.
Thank you so much, Kun Suthichai. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Most welcome.
Suthichai Yoon has provided me with some fascinating insights, not only into Thai politics, but also into the Thai psyche. He's given a fresh perspective into this country in transition.